Hi, I'm Martyn Sibley, a community leader at Open Inclusion. Welcome to our new podcast series, Inclusive Design, Broader Perspectives for Better Experiences, also available as a caption video log on Open Inclusion's YouTube channel. Open Inclusion is a research, user insight, design and innovation consultancy based in London, England. We help organisations create beautifully inclusive and effective experiences. We hope you enjoy this podcast. If you would like to know more about Open and the work we do, or would just like to contact us, please visit openinclusion.com. We would love to hear from you. In this podcast series, we interview a wide range of people who help us better understand inclusion, both from a user and service provider perspective. Together, we will investigate a wide range of user needs and preferences. We will explore how organizations and individuals can capture and use diverse insight in customer experience design. Plus, we'll discuss how user needs and constraints can spark powerful, innovative ideas that can transform your business. Today, we are interviewing Lynn Cox, who is an artist, a business owner, and a jet setter. You'll hear all about Lynn's views as a consumer, family person, and entrepreneur with a visual impairment. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi everyone, it's Martyn Sibley here on the first of an exciting new podcast from Open Inclusion, where we're going to be exploring all types of interesting and wonderful topics. Today, I'm joined by one of my fellow panel members on the Open Inclusion panel, Lynn Cox, who's actually taken time out on her holiday as well. So thank you for joining me today, Lynn.
Thank you.
How's the holiday going so far?
It's lovely and it's hot, and it's really nice to join you whilst over in Bulgaria.
Bulgaria. Whereabouts in Bulgaria are you?
Nazarbayev, which is
okay.
quite south Bulgaria.
Brilliant. Well, cool. We'll crack on into the crux of the conversation now and let you get back off to the beach afterwards as well. So first of all, I think really it's just great for you to tell a bit of your backstory, a bit about, your impairment, a bit about growing up with an impairment, but, broadly just a sort of backstory about what you've got up to in your life, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, I'm visually impaired. I've got retinitis pigmentosa. But as a child, I never realised my sight was so bad. I just thought I was long-sighted and pretty clumsy and couldn't catch a ball. I think my parents were pretty much in denial of the fact. And it was only when I got to about 15 and the eyesight started to get worse rather than slightly better that I realised, it was going to be a long-term issue and I wouldn't meet my lifetime goal of being a racing car driver. So at that point, I went to the RNC, Royal National College for the Blind in Hereford, when I was 17. I learnt Braille there. I did some O-levels, A-levels, and they prepared me for university. So I went off and did a maths and computing degree. And I think I've still got a very strong computer understanding background, even though the languages and whatever have changed since then. However, I didn't want to be a maths teacher, and actually working for Hewlett Packard for a year was so tricky with the visual impairment and so stressful that I thought I don't actually want to work in that environment. So that's when I retrained as an artist. I was very lucky I got funded from a charity to do another course. I trained as an artist. I did a BA and an MA in fine art, sculpture at London School of Art. And since then I've been working as an artist, arts workshops. But from that, I did equalities training, but with a real artistic emphasis on it. So when I go into organisations, we do a lot of role play, we do a lot of making models. It's all artistically produced. And I also trained as a coach because I could see the gap in the market, or the gap for people actually, artists and disabled people, just getting a bit of career advice, some, nudging where they want to go, but where they want to go. So not mentoring them, but asking those questions that help them to lead to where they want to go. So that's how I work now. I also work as a consultant, and I've done for different organisations, including Open, for a number of years. So I come into organisations, I do little bits of work on things like Skype, working at the moment on ISO platform. Is bank website accessible? Is the new government passport site usable for visually impaired people and their technology and things like that? So it's a real portfolio career. I have 2 children who are 13 and 11. They're a big part of my life. And the other huge part of my life is running.
Well, it's an amazing backstory there. There's so many things that be interested to unpick. I think that I like the balance you've found in the kind of professional side of obviously understanding what skills and experiences are needed in the professional world to be able to obviously further your career. But I think that when you're retrained in fine art and what that brings to your coaching and your training, it must be very, very powerful, because I know that I've been on many training courses and worked with coaches, and some of them, not everyone, but some can be a bit dry, and it's hard to remember the learning outcomes because it's just very sort of logical and chronological, etc. So it sounds like a lot of fun, the way you can bring that creativity to teaching people about things as well.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big part. I think most of my work is around access, being accessible for everyone, but also a bit about creative. It's essential whether I'm doing an art workshop, whether I'm doing a qualities training, or whether I'm coaching somebody, that I use creative approaches, because as you say, that's when it sticks in people's brains, and that's when you get the long-term effects.
Yeah, we need the sort of visual and the emotional elements to actually help our memory as well. So we'll come back up to the present in a little while, but looking a little bit more in the past. One of the things that I'm going to ask every interviewee on the podcast is really around when you were growing up, or it could even be, sort of in earlier adulthood as well. But how did you feel about the kind of being disabled, and what things disabled you, and how did you feel about your kind of future in that version of yourself back in those days?
I think it's quite tricky, because I probably didn't see myself as disabled. I just thought I was long-sighted, which was an eye condition that lots of people potentially had. I couldn't see so well. And because I think my parents were in denial, and I never found out till I was 15, 16, that I got retinitis pigmentosa, and then I had to look up myself what it was. It was isolating. I was bullied at school because of the poor sight. I was stopped from doing games, just left, to do. I discovered to do an awful lot about sports people and what they'd done in the past, because all I ever did was answer these sheets on different people and read about them, which is great. I still love sport now, but I never actually did any as a kid. I was kept in the bottom class at school. I was limited to what I could do. I didn't realise it was all my sight at the time. I just thought I wasn't that clever. But having a first in maths and computing probably contradicts that completely. But at school, I was completely inhibited. At home life, there was no opportunities. It wasn't till I went to the Royal National College and I discovered I could do things. I could do maths, I understood computing, I could do art, that I suddenly discovered a world that was open to them, open to me. And at that point, and I've always said it, that the best thing that ever happened to me was actually, in a way, losing my sight. Because if I'd stayed at home, sighted or unsighted, I don't think the ambition would have been there, the structure would have been there. So actually, my sight, going to the RNC, finding possibilities, and then developing from then on, and knowing actually there's no limits to what I can do.
Yeah,
really. I do, but there's no limits to what I actually do. I might be able to drive a car anymore. That doesn't mean I can't sit in the passenger seat and go 256 kilometres an hour. So it's that knowledge, I think, and that understanding. So in some ways, losing my sight has given me opportunities. It hasn't restricted them.
Yeah. How old were you when you lost your sight then?
I always had poor sight. I lost my reading vision at 17, and I just started to learn Braille at the time, which is brilliant. And I read my first Braille book and my first book all the way through at 17. And as a kid, never being able to read quick enough to read a book all the way through, it was amazing. So if I didn't lose my sight, I wanted to learn Braille. I wanted to be able to read properly.
So learning Braille was a very defining moment for you then, to be able to learn more easily, really.
Yes, yeah. For me, I think, and I think for a lot of people, Braille is the key to education for visually impaired. And it's one of the things they're trying to teach less of, saying you can do it with computers, with voices. You don't take it in the same way. It's not the same as reading a book with your fingers, or if you're sighted with your eyes and taking it in. It's great to have audio books. You know, it's great to have computers that talk to you, but actually Braille is the one way. I couldn't have done my maths and computing degree without a little 20-cell Braille display. Do you know what I mean? It's 20 cells. It read little lines of code at a time, or little bits of mathematical problems, right it under my fingers.
That's so interesting, because obviously, I've been working in the disability or accessibility sector now for about 10 or so years, and growing up, I came into contact with lots of people with different impairments. I generally feel I've got a good understanding, but I never actually understood the really true importance and value of Braille until you just explained that. So thank you for that.
Thank you for listening. I mean, I don't think a lot of people get it. Do you know what I mean? Because I think you can read other ways, but it's real haptic reading rather than a passive way of doing it.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, on that same area of the growing up, and obviously you actually acquired, although you had a visual impairment, you lost your sight when you were 17. I mean, how was it with role models and things like that? Was there anyone around that you could look up to a little bit further ahead that kind of showed you the way, or was it very much you were just feeling your way as you came against the barriers and having ambition as well?
I think it was very much finding my own way. I knew a few people had gone down the maths and computing route, so I knew that was feasible, and everybody at 18, 19, 20 suggested I did a maths and computing degree, and I was relatively good at maths, could do computing. Thought, oh, that's it, I've got a career, I've got a well-paid job. But actually, the thing I wanted to do and the thing I kept asking to do, why can't I do an arts degree? Well, you can't, because none of the papers at A-level are accessible. If you can't do the A-level, you can't get into an art school. And that's all I hit. But I got to the end of the maths and computing degree, but I did a year out at Hewlett-Packard as a sandwich degree, and I knew it wasn't the right environment for me. I knew I couldn't work. I loved the programming, I loved the creativity of programming. I just didn't like the big open plan environment in an office. It just didn't suit me. So I was very lucky, and I suppose I was very lucky I had certain supports. I wouldn't say I had role models, but I had a number of people, mainly cited my geography teacher beforehand, was very inspirational at the RNC, and my art teacher at the RNC, and he actually had me back for Royal National College for a year to teach a bit of maths and to work a bit in the art department and show people what to do. And about that, and with how it was his help as well, getting me the sponsorship, which was really hard to do another BA, or to do the BA after the BSc. If it wasn't for those two people, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah, it's amazing how people come in to our lives when, at the time it doesn't maybe make any kind of long-term sense, but when you look back, you can see how the dots kind of joined, and that those vital people came at the right time to help you take the course that you truly wanted to take.
Yeah, and also I think it's having the nerve to ask, because I asked my art teacher, could I come back for a year? is there any way you can get me back to the RNC so I can do my A level? I wanted to go to art college. So part of it was him bending the rules, maybe, but also without having that inner courage, even though I'm quiet a lot of the time, I go along with what other people want. If there's something that really matters to me, like having the kids at home, not in a hospital, I'll do it. Do you know what I mean?
Find a way.
Yeah, but most of the time I'll just roll with the flow.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we'll move sort of forward a bit now to today, but one thing I just wanted to mention, what you said about if you hadn't have lost your sight, you're not sure if you'd have gone on to do the things you've done because of that ambition and, you know, the sort of wanting to get out there and just, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was there any element of proving points, or was it just sort of overcoming that barrier for yourself?
I think for me it's always proving I can do what people say I can't do.
Yeah,
I'm
so
very...
that might be the case.
And I've, you know, somebody turns around and says you can't do that, I think yes I can.
Yeah, and I think, you know, many people are, there's Simon Sinek talks about the why, and this is in a general kind of personal development way, that people are always looking for that passion and motivation that pushes them through the tough days and the having to go off and acquire skills and make all the right connections. You need that fuel. And I know a lot of people I've met with a disability, there's so many barriers and oppression that goes on, but equally it does become a fuel to just get out there and make things happen. So yeah, I found that quite interesting. So like bringing it, sorry, then go on.
Sorry, you either go towards something that you really want, or away from something you don't want. And I didn't want to go back to what my childhood was like. So it really was a thing, initially anyway, of me going away from what didn't make me happy, knowing I couldn't go back to that. I don't know if I ever knew what I was going towards. I kind of knew where I was going towards, but it was very open.
Yeah. So the goal was a bit more vague, like a general direction and idea, but not so specific. But you definitely knew what you didn't want to happen. Yeah,
exactly. So I wanted education away from home for the nicest of reasons. Life at home, and I wanted me to decide what my life was going to be rather than somebody else. Yeah.
Great. So bringing us up to today, I mean, another question I'm going to ask everyone is really around, I think you mentioned that you didn't feel disabled when you were younger, but then when you look back, there were limitations on what people expected of you and probably other physical, environmental barriers as well. But like at where you are at now with your career and children and all the rest of it, it'd be great just to have a little bit of an insight into the things that make life hard for you with your visual impairment that you have.
Yeah, well, I think by the age of 20, I finally accepted the sight was going, and I got my first guide dog. I think the barriers are often not the barriers you expect. So yes, I'm visually impaired. I can't see hardly anything at all now, just a very little bit of light and dark, which is of no use whatsoever, really. However, I think it's that with the interlinking problem. So I have migraines, and a lot of that is due to stress, sometimes with travelling, sometimes with, work levels. I also have anxiety sometimes when I'm travelling. I love travelling, and don't get me wrong, I would never stop travelling because I love going to places and seeing places, and I get a real buzz from travelling. But there's also always a certain anxiety there because you don't know if somebody's going to meet you off the train. Normally somebody will meet you off the train or the tube if you don't know where you are and help you. You don't know if that's going to happen. I find that planes are usually a little bit better. They will at least meet you at some point. So that's, and the more I travel, the more I'm less anxious about that. But it's a mixture of the visual impairment, the anxiety, migraines, and other issues that kind of interrelate. And I don't think people see the complexity of what can happen. So for me, one of the greatest things to help me run my business, and I must run 80% of my business from the mobile phone. I'm even talking to you today from the mobile phone, because Zoom on the mobile phone is easier than Zoom on the computer. Although I still needed help signing up. But I literally run 80% of my business, probably 80% of my social life from the phone. You know, whether that's listening to an audiobook, listening to the radio, you know, listening to cricket, whether it's sorting out my business emails, you know, texting people, WhatsApping in groups if we're meeting up for social events or whatever. It's all done by the phone. So I'm absolutely and utterly reliant on the mobile phone being accessible and working. When that goes down, it all goes.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's a really fragile way to live. With the technology, you know, 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been the case. You know, I was into computing in 1989. I was computing relatively soon, you know, using DOS even. But what the computers do now, and their reliance, and that's also where my bugbear is, which I know you haven't asked me yet, but my bugbear is people changing the apps. So one day you can use Facebook, it's fine. The next day you go on, and it's completely and utterly changed, and it may or may not be accessible. And that's where the anxiety comes in. So even though I love using my phone, I use it for everything, you know, because I generally use Facebook as a business tool rather than a social tool. Same with Twitter and a lot of the other clients. So when I'm using the social media, if I'm using email, I'm using Audible, you know, an awful lot of the books I read, yes, I read fiction, but an awful lot are business books I read. If they go down, I've lost contact of doing something probably completely. So if I can't Facebook on the phone, yes, I can potentially do it on the computer, but they might have messed that up as well. Yeah. So there's always, on a day-to-day basis, there's always a little anxiety at the back. Oh, you know, Skype's a natural one. You know, I remember doing some user testing for an organisation about 3 years ago, and it was completely accessible with, you know, the odd button not labelled, but if you knew what it was, you could use it. Now it's a bit of a nightmare again. And every time these organisations, Google Docs on the computer, things like that, every time they do an update, they completely and utterly forget about accessibility. They just want it looking good, looking trendy, the latest look, get the new people in, get more subscribers. You know, Facebook and Google thought about, I don't know any visually impaired people that have managed to do Google ads or Facebook ads by themselves independently. Now that is dreadful. They're losing out on income, but I suppose the companies see it as they're reaching 80% of the people with 20% effort. You know, if they were to get to the next 80%, 20% of people, it would take 80% effort, and they're not going to do it. And it's just, you know, it feels like lip service all the time.
Yeah, no, that's very insightful. So it sounds like there's obviously elements about having a visual impairment, and some of the migraines that you get in their own right are you know, of course, going to cause you difficulties in everyday life. But actually, you know, with technology and with maybe some improvements in transport and the services of the transport, you found ways to travel and to interact with the world via the phone. But there's actual times when people or the companies update things, and then suddenly you're not able to interact with their app or their program, and so that of course will disable you. But also, yeah, just the anxiety that something could happen like that is quite tiring and draining by the sound of it.
Yeah, I think it's a general tiring. I think most companies to do with travel are slightly improving. I saw an app recently that's not commercially available yet, but it sent you texts when you'd booked assistance. Now, that one simple thing, if I book assistance on British Rail, Network Rail, anywhere in the UK, and I knew somebody was definitely going to meet me at Doncaster or Cardiff or Glasgow or wherever I'm travelling to, that would take all the stress out of that journey going up and wondering if anybody's going to meet me at the end. And in the end, it's probably not the end of the world because I'm not shy and my guide dog's pretty cute. So, you know, I'll say I need help and people will see the dog and help, you know, but you shouldn't have to do that. No, I shouldn't have to worry about that. No. So I some type of formal text. You know, we contact Network Rail when we're travelling to say we need help. There's no dialogue. It's just a one-way contact. They wouldn't want to take you off the train. They don't say, oh, running 5 minutes late, stay on the platform. No, they'll leave you there for 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes or somebody will come and help you. Do you know what I mean? And then they'll say, oh, well, you're never there when, you know, you say you're going to be there. But you think, well, I'm not going to stay on the platform isolated at 10 o'clock at night by myself if somebody's going to offer to walk me to the end of the platform.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we've got different impairments, but the amount of times I've had troubles trying to get assistance on trains is innumerable. We need to move on to the last section in a minute before we wrap up. But are there any like broader areas of life that you would want to mention that are disabling, or is transport and tech that doesn't serve the needs that you have? Are they the main two that you would say?
I think actually the main one, which is probably the more subtle one, is things like attitudes. So, attitudes to people. If you're booking, I don't know, a meal, or if you're going to a restaurant and you need the menu read out, you know, which I always feel dreadful. I think I'm wasting their time, you know, they're not paid to read out the menu. But then if they won't produce a menu I can read beforehand, or, you know, because often they'll do PDF menus that aren't necessarily accessible. I tend to use places like Just Eat if we're booking online now. I'll at least look at the order on that, even if we go directly then to the shop to order, because at least then I've got my own choice. I can look at all the menu and spend an hour. I love places like Pizza Express because they do braille menus, so I can go in there. I'm independent. I think that's the thing, lack of independence. I'm at this resort now, and my family are around to get all my drinks and all my meals because everything's buffet and self-service. I hate that. Do you know what I mean? Because you're slowing them off. You're taking up their time. You feel a burden. It's tricky. I mean, some things you can change. Obviously, you can't. I mean, I do as much as I can, and I think I do really well. I do all the food ordering via apps, everything like that. So I tend to avoid, I suppose, going into places. So I rarely go into supermarkets because it's easier to order it on the app. So what I think the barriers are is possibly me not confronting some of the places I would go if I could see properly, because I just think, oh, it's going to be too much hassle.
There's definitely a lot of disabled people with different impairments have this apologetic, guilty feeling, but actually your point earlier about the business case, so like Google ads and Facebook ads, they're at war with each other and other companies to get the market for digital advertising. And so to spend a bit of time speaking to people in the disabled community about their barriers and their needs as business owners with ads, and obviously with restaurants, you know, about we are consumers and we like to go out and have a bite to eat. The potential revenue and profit that they could gain just by making some potentially quite small and not that costly changes would be significant. But I think my experience and your experience, I think, is similar, that the companies know that there is this sort of market and that the solutions can be quite simple if they just take the time to actually listen and get to know our needs.
Yeah, exactly, because a lot of it wouldn't necessarily be that costly. Do you know what I mean? Making menus accessible on their websites, for example, wouldn't be that costly. You know, organisations like Pizza Express that have got big chains, having the stuff in Braille, they replace it every 6 months, you know, one per restaurant. Okay, it's a bit of a charge, but it's not an overall compared to, you know, what they're paying for all their glossy ones.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. I know basically the sun is coming in the window, Lynn, just to let you know, and I've got a rather funny shadow cast across my face at the moment. But we're going to crack on. We only got one more question.
Okay.
Basically, look into the future. So this is again something we're going to ask every person whether I'm going to be having on the podcast. We're going to have to be quite snappy because we're already at the half-hour mark now. There's so much to discuss and debate and talk about. It's been really fascinating. The first part is, what one thing could be done in, say, the next year that would make your life a lot easier? And we've probably touched on some of this already. And then the other thing is sort of way into the future. What would your vision and aspiration of a fully inclusive and accessible world be?
Okay, I think it would be, for me, the technology side. I've got a guide dog, that and Maps or Google Maps sorts out me getting around most places and me having a voice and asking people. So it's not so much getting around. I think for me, it's access to information, whether that's a book, whether that's a website for banking, food ordering, looking at close to the children, whatever. I would just like people to take website accessibility a lot more seriously and consider the business side of it. I think long term it would be to have an inclusive society without us having to think about it. Like here in Bulgaria, okay, the complex I think is at least 10 years old. But, you know, for a wheelchair user, it's just about usable. They seem to have replaced an awful lot of the steps with very, very steep slopes, which would be. But generally, there are ways around. But, you know, I would like people almost to retro design to make things more accessible. You know, I know some things can't, they're of historical importance. Like yesterday we went to Nessebar Island, which is an old island that goes back to Greek-Roman times, mainly medieval, with cobbles and things like that. I know they're not going to change anything like that. It's the World Heritage Site. But, you know, some hotel that was being built 10, 20 years ago, why can't it be more accessible? You know, why can't these organisations think about, especially with new projects, just, you can't make it accessible for everyone because the bumps that help me cross the road aren't good for people with mobility issues, but just to almost do the best practice, to think about it. I think for me it's an intellectual thing, and it's what the apps aren't doing now, and I think what they need to do in the future is you think about the disability requirements, the inclusion requirements, knowing you can't do everything, but doing as much as you can from the start. You don't keep adding it on at the 9th hour. And
including disabled people in that as well,
yeah. I mean, for me, it's always been, I'm terrible. I go around places and think, oh, a wheelchair could use a computer. Oh, how's somebody in a wheelchair meant to press the 7th floor? You know, why isn't the BSL or captioning on this? Do you know what I mean? I'm for asking the girls these questions. So I think when I go around nowadays, you know, I'm supposed to be an equalities trainer. I feel an injustice, I think, for everyone, not just for visually impaired people. And it just bugs me, even if they're beating the visually impaired needs, if they're blatantly not doing somebody else's needs, like somebody that needs a certain colour text because of being autistic or something, or, you know, just clear speech, clear writing. I'm thinking, well, how will somebody with a learning difficulty understand that? And I do that all the time. I would love in 10 years' time to go around places and not be analysing everything and, you know, finding thing after thing all the time.
Yeah, so it's really about including everyone, isn't it? Not doing sort of bodge jobs and not doing just for certain areas of the disabled community, but really thinking about everyone's needs and finding the best possible solution for that.
Yeah, so that's what I'd really love.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's really cool. All right, Lynn. Well, you have to say we better wrap up. But thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you want to sort of finish with saying before we sign off, or do you feel like you've shared everything you wanted to?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this new web podcast series. And I suppose it's not a podcast, is it? Because you video me. blog series. On behalf of Open, and I hope it's been interesting.
Great. Yeah, so there'll be the audio version as a podcast, and then I've heard someone call the video versions a vodcast. That was a new one for me yesterday. So anyone watching the vodcast for the last 5 or so will see this rather interesting pattern on my face with the sun, and I'll get that one sorted for next time. But thanks again, Lynn, and have a lovely holiday. Yeah,
thank you, Martyn.
Take care. Bye. We hope you enjoyed the first of our new series of podcasts, Inclusive Design, Broader Perspectives for Better Experiences, also available as video logs on the Open Inclusion YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us. I'm Martyn Sibley, the Community Leader at Open Inclusion. I look forward to welcoming you back next month when I'll be interviewing Tom Pakinko, Research Director of Open Inclusion, on the topic of how focus groups can provide great insight in early stage product or service experience design. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.